Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to hear about the next five-year update to the Lower Kissimmee Basin Water Supply Plan. My name is Tom Coleos. I'm the Water Supply Planning Section Lead at the district, and I'll be the moderator for today's workshop. This Zoom meeting is being recorded, and within a few days, a recording will be made available to the public. The presentations you see here today will be posted to the district's Lower Kissimmee Basin webpage if you want to view them again later. I also wanted to mention that Thursday, May 2nd, is a different district workshop about the proposed stormwater treatment area in Okeechobee County. Again, thanks for joining us. And we have Governing Board member, Mr. Ben Butler, attending the workshop today. And Mr. Butler, did you want to say a few words?
Hey, thank you, Tom, and good morning. Sound check. Am I coming through okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, good deal. Thanks, Tom. Well, good morning, everyone, and I appreciate everybody attending today's kickoff meeting for the 2024 update to the Lower Kissimmee Basin Water Supply Plan. Your active participation and sharing of thoughts and ideas is critical to ensuring that this plan update addresses the issues and concerns for the Lower Kissimmee Basin. Now, all of us participating in today's meeting know it, but it bears repeating. Water is critical to everything we do. We need it for drinking. We need it to grow crops, to water livestock, and to grow their feed, for recreation, tourism, our municipalities and homes, and for our environment. Our economy depends on a sustainable water supply, and over time, we've learned that our freshwater supplies are not unlimited. That's why being proactive and planning for our future water needs while not harming our water resources, including our natural systems, is so critical. We're all in it together, and we need to work towards identification of water source options and projects that provide a sustainable water supply for today, tomorrow, and future generations. On behalf of my fellow governing board members, again, thank you for attending today's meeting and looking forward to a great kickoff. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you, sir. Okay, this stakeholder workshop is going to have 5 presentations in it. I'm going to talk about the plan update process and give a summary of the 2019 plan from 5 years ago. Then Chad, the Lower Kissimmee Basin Plan Manager, will talk about progress since 2019 and the 2024 goal and objectives. Then Leslie Wah will give an overview of the comprehensive Everglades restoration projects. Then we'll have Rebecca describe the draft demand estimates and projections, which are really the heart of the plan. And then Chad will finish up with our next steps in the planning process and talk about schedule. Under the Zoom format, all attendees are muted. However, we still want to hear from you, as Mr. Butler said. We will have questions and comment periods after each presentation. So hold your questions until then. Your comments and thoughts are critical to make sure that the 2024 plan update addresses your issues and concerns. So I encourage you to share those with us today. I'll now give a brief description of the plan update process, followed by a summary of the 2019 plan. This plan update will follow Florida statute requirements, as all of our planning process entails. Water management districts need to identify sufficient water supply sources and future projects to meet existing and future reasonable beneficial uses during a 1 in 10 year drought for a minimum of 20 years while sustaining water resources and natural systems. Water supply plans have requirements according to the Florida statutes, and legislation was passed in the late 1990s requiring those water supply plans to contain the elements listed here: demand estimates and projections for a 20-year period, source options, resource analyses, and identification of issues. The plan must also contain water resource and water supply development projects. In addition, MFL prevention and recovery strategies need to be reviewed and, if necessary, be updated. The district's been divided into 5 planning areas as indicated on the map on the right, basically around drainage basins. The development of plans for every region is staggered since the same planning team works on each one. The dates on the map represent when the next update for that region is due for this current round of plans. As you can see on the graphic, Lake Okeechobee touches 4 of our planning areas. However, Lake Okeechobee is formally included and addressed in the Lower East Coast Water Supply Plan, which is currently being updated. The planning horizon for this Lower Kissimmee plan update is 2022 through 2045. And all of the plans with this date schedule shown here have the planning horizon out to 2045. A little bit about what a regional water supply plan does and doesn't do. Simply speaking, a water supply plan is a proactive approach toward water supply. We know there will be increased needs for water in the future and potential shortfalls. And water supply plans provide a roadmap to let us get ahead of those demands by identifying sources and strategies now and how those demands will be met while still protecting our natural resources. Approval of the plan triggers a requirement for local governments to update their 10-year water facilities work plan within 18 months of plan approval. On the right, what a plan does not do, it doesn't authorize permits, it doesn't adopt rules or MFLs, although it does establish prevention and recovery strategies for MFLs. Those are included in the water supply plan. It also does not address water quality issues. A little bit about the Lower Kissimmee Basin planning area. It includes portions of Okeechobee, Highlands, and Glades County. In addition, the Seminole Tribe's Brighton Reservation is in the planning area, shown on the map in that purplish color down here by Lake Okeechobee. Bieber estimates, and Bieber is the Bureau of Economic and Business Research, and they estimate a population of around 57,000 by 2045. That's a 9% increase from 2022. Rebecca will talk in more detail about the population and agricultural projections in her presentation. The planning area also contains significant environmental features such as Taylor Creek, Fish Eating Creek, the Kissimmee River, and Kissimmee Prairie Preserve State Park. All right, public participation is a necessary component of the planning process. We need to get input from all stakeholders. It provides a balanced approach to reflect the needs of the planning area. And we're soliciting input today and at other group and stakeholder meetings and during governing board meetings. We can also have individual stakeholder meetings to get more details to consider and incorporate into the plan. A little bit about the process. As I said, we're kicking off today, and we will work through the process through multiple meetings, public meetings, individual meetings, draft up chapters and share those with the public for comment. And in November of this year, bring it to the governing board for final approval. Now I want to give a quick summary of the plan from 5 years ago as a refresher. In 2019, the population was projected to grow by 12% by 2040, and agriculture with a 3% increase in irrigated acres. Overall, there's a 5% increase in demands was anticipated. As you can see by the table, the largest user of water in the basin is clearly agricultural. There's a large economic impact, positive impact for agricultural production in the basin. Water source options. This slide represents the various source options, with fresh groundwater and surface water being the traditional sources, and the other options are considered alternative water sources. Although conservation is not a source of water, it can stretch the available water supply from traditional sources. So we list it here as a source option. A little bit about groundwater in the area of lower Kissimmee Basin. The graphic on the left is more broad sweeping than just the lower Kissimmee Basin. It starts on the left-hand side in the north near Lake Toho up in the Orlando area and moves south. As you move to the right, you're moving south into the lower Kissimmee Basin. You'll notice here that the Florida aquifer, shown as this upper producing zone, is rather shallow up in the Orlando area and is widely used fresh water. And as you move south, the Florida aquifer dips down and goes deeper, 500 to 700 feet below land surface. And as you approach Lake Okeechobee, the water quality changes to saline or brackish water. The Avon Park permeable zone is another part of the Florida aquifer system that's more productive and can produce more water. However, it is more brackish and needs water quality treatment such as reverse osmosis to be a viable source. And then the lower Florida aquifer, much deeper and even more brackish, approaching seawater quality. A summary of the resource considerations from the 2019 plan. There's limited surface water availability in the area. Lake Istapoga and the Indian Prairie Canal System has had restrictions on it from the early 1980s. Lake Okeechobee and Lake Okeechobee service area has had restricted allocations since 2008. It allows for some amount of additional allocation if other existing allocations are expired or given up. The Kissimmee River Basin Reservation was also adopted in 2021. At the time, it was under development back in 2019. And that reserved the water for fish and wildlife within the Kissimmee River and its floodplain. Minimum flows and levels. There are some lakes along the Lake Wales Ridge in Southwest Florida Water Management District that have minimum levels associated with those, and we coordinated with Southwest to ensure that impacts were not occurring there. A little bit about the resource evaluation. As I just said, the surface water sources are in restricted allocation areas, and it limits the availability of new surface water. And the groundwater was evaluated using the lower Kissimmee Basin groundwater model, and no adverse impacts were anticipated through the demands associated out to 2040. The future direction in 2019 some of these have been completed, such as the Kissimmee River Water Reservation, coordination of modeling, and completion of the Herbert Hoover Dike rehabilitation by the Army Corps of Engineers. The map on the right comes from the Army Corps of Engineers website and shows Port Mayaca on the east-hand side, and the dike and structures, culverts have been rehabilitated and or replaced all the way around the south part of the lake and up through around Moorhaven, Clewiston, and Moorhaven, and up into Glades County. And the conclusion of the 2019 Lower Kissimmee Basin Plan was that demands could continue to be met through 2040 with appropriate management and conservation. We'll now take questions and public comment. If you're participating via Zoom, please raise your hand. We request that all comments be limited to around 3 minutes.
All right, we have one hand raised. Rich Reed. Rich, still showing you're muted. There you go.
Hi, sorry about that.
No problem.
And I apologize if this is something I should know, but I did want to ask the question. I thought I heard that Lake Okeechobee is not the is not considered in the update for our region or the Lower Kissimmee Basin region, and that it's in a south region, and that is being updated. I just wanted to understand why that's the case when that is one of our primary sources of water, and maybe a secondary source for the counties that are to the south.
It's formally addressed. It is discussed and considered in the Lower Kissimmee Basin because it is a source that is utilized, as you said, but it's formally addressed and evaluated more so in the Lower East Coast water supply plan. And that's primarily because the water for water supply purposes is sent to the Lower East Coast service areas and the urban boundary along the Lower East Coast. Does that help?
I still am, I guess, a little confused because my understanding is that it's a secondary use or a secondary source or more of an emergency source of water supply, where it's more of a primary source for us here in Okeechobee County. So I guess I'm still wondering.
If you mean for Okeechobee County for drinking water supply, that's true. And Okeechobee Utility Authority has a water use permit to use water from Lake Okeechobee to treat and distribute as drinking water supply. And that is their primary source.
Right.
However, that's only around 3 to 4 million gallons a day. And the Lower East Coast uses tens of millions of gallons a day, hundreds of millions of gallons a day, pulled from the aquifer that is recharged by water from Lake Okeechobee.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure. Any other questions? Please raise your hand. If you're participating via phone, you can do *9 to raise your hand.
No additional hands.
Okay.
Oh, Gary Ritter.
Hey, Gary.
And Devon, can you unmute Gary?
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Hey, Gary.
Hey, how's everyone today?
Good.
Good. How are you?
Good, good. I was just kind of curious, going back a little bit as to how the Lake Okeechobee Watershed Project and the SERP project fall into the Lower Kissimmee Water Supply Plan. I mean, is that factored in when you're looking at water supply for that basin, as well as, that's kind of following up with Rich's comment with Lake Okeechobee as well?
Yes. And Leslie Waugh is going to talk give a little bit more detail about that project.
Okay.
But yes, there is water supply component to that Lake Okeechobee watershed project. the ASR wells are proposed to store. I don't know the number, but lots of water underground for water supply. Sure.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mhm. Any other questions before we move on?
All right, not seeing any additional hands raised.
Okay. Next on the agenda, we'll have Chad tell us about the 2024 LKB plan, goal, and objectives.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Chad Birchka, the Water Supply Plan Manager for the Lower Kissimmee Basin. On this part of the presentation, I'll be going over the goal and objectives of the 2024 plan update and the progress made since the 2019 plan was last updated and approved 5 years ago. As touched on earlier by Tom, the water management districts are required by rule to develop water supply plans every 5 years with the statutory goal of identifying that water supplies from existing water sources and future projects are sufficient to meet existing and future demands for reasonable and beneficial uses at least 20 years into the future, while sustaining water resources and natural systems. During 1 and 10 year drought conditions means that water resources and natural systems will be protected, and the combined effects of all uses of water will not cause harm during a drought condition that occurs with a return frequency of once every 10 years. The objectives of this water supply plan update are very similar to what they were 5 years ago and include updating the projections for population and the demands for all use types through 2045, conducting an analysis of the water resources, and by working in conjunction with our regulatory water use permitting program, ensuring those resources are protected along with natural systems. Water supply plans are developed with input from local governments to promote compatibility with their planning efforts and to help them stay ahead of their growing demands. The plans can be used as a reference by local governments to modify local comprehensive plans, update water supply facility work plans, and to adopt ordinances. Local governments are required to submit an updated work plan within 18 months of approval of a water supply plan update. We're always staying up to date with other water resource initiatives, such as water resource development projects that are part of the SERB or Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, so that they're integrated with the water supply plans. And as part of that, a key objective is identifying planned water supply and water resource development projects, such as the Lake Okeechobee Component A Reservoir, which Leslie will describe in detail on the next section of the presentation. Ultimately, in order to meet the previously stated goal, the main objective is showing that water supplies are sufficient to meet demands through at least 20 years, up to and including 1 and 10 year drought conditions, while also protecting and enhancing water resources and natural systems. We'll have a much more detailed description of what we do to protect and enhance natural systems at our next stakeholder meeting. So since the last plan update, quite a lot has happened. In 2021, the district and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers completed the Kissimmee River Restoration Project, and a water reservation was adopted for the Kissimmee River. In 23, rehabilitation and repair of the Herbert Hoover Dike surrounding Lake Okeechobee was completed, and the Lake Okeechobee Watershed Restoration Project, including the ASR Science Plan and the Lake Okeechobee Component A Reservoir, some major water resource development projects are in progress. Additionally, our hydrogeologists and groundwater modelers have been very busy undertaking some other tasks, including the completion of multiple technical publications and several ongoing hydrogeologic studies and groundwater modeling efforts. So listed here, these are the regulatory water resource protection tools that we have. Minimum flows and levels, water reservations, and restricted allocation areas. And all these tools are already in place. And while they're implemented by rule, not by the water supply plan, they are described in the plan, along with the prevention and recovery strategies for minimum flow and levels water bodies. And the Lower Kissimmee Basin planning area, previously adopted rules include the Istiqpoga, Okeechobee, and Lower West Coast Aquifer MFLs, restricted allocation areas for the Lake Okeechobee service area, and the Lake Istiqpoga Indian Prairie Canal System. As previously noted, following the 2019 plan update, in 2021, the district adopted water reservation rules for the Kissimmee River and chain of lakes that identify and reserve from consumptive use the water needed to protect fish and wildlife in the restored river and associated water bodies. We'll do a deep dive into these resource protection measures on our next stakeholder meeting. So what you're looking at here is a map of the Kissimmee River and chain of lakes. The restoration project returned flow to the river's meandering historic channel and floodplain plains. The project included restoration of more than 40 square miles of river floodplain, containing approximately 25,000 acres of wetlands and 44 miles of historic river channel. The entire river and chain of lakes shown here is about 172,500 acres and includes areas outside of the Lower Kissimmee Basin planning area. In the Upper Kissimmee Basin CFWI planning region. The Kissimmee River area in this planning region is located just south of the S65 structure at the northern boundary of the planning area. Okay. A publication updated following the 2019 plan update approval is the support document, which is a useful document used to supplement all of our regional water supply plans. The document was originally made by extracting a lot of the more detailed information from each of the plans and includes very detailed district-wide information on the legal authority and mandates for water supply planning, the linkage between water supply planning and local planning efforts, comprehensive information on the district's water conservation activities and initiatives, detailed descriptions of ecosystem restoration and water resource development projects, and the regulatory protections we have in place for the Everglades, water resources, estuaries, and natural systems, and how those protections are implemented in coordination with the regulatory permitting process. And that document's available online at the link here on our website too. Another publication recently completed is the water supply cost estimation study, which supplements a previously discussed document. This publication includes very detailed information regarding the construction, operation, and maintenance costs estimations for alternative water supply projects, such as surface water reservoirs, aquifer storage and recovery systems, reclaimed water treatment, storage, and distribution systems, water supply wells, and reverse osmosis treatment and disposal systems. It's a very useful document for municipalities and local governments projecting capital improvement costs. And that's part of a requirement for updating water supply facility work plans. And also useful for anyone considering the economic feasibility of implementing alternative water supplies. All right, the district's water supply planning group has been publishing on an annual basis to support the water supply plans, the water use estimation report. The report is developed primarily using actual pumpage data from water use permittees that are required to report to the district. And we also account for the smaller water uses that aren't required to report by using the includes usage information by source and by use category. And then those numbers are to use for each use type in 2022, which is the base year for this water supply plan update. So some interesting facts from the report pertaining to the Lower Kissimmee Basin. Out of the total district-wide use of 2.7 billion gallons a day, average, approximately 5% of that is used in the Lower Kissimmee Basin in 2022 for a total of 123 million gallons a day, with over 95% of that going to agricultural water uses. 54% of the water used in the Kissimmee Basin was from fresh groundwater and 42% from surface water. You can also access this report online on our website using the link here. In addition to the water use estimation report and the support document, several regional hydrogeological studies have been published by the Water Supply Bureau since 2019. Our hydrogeologists have been busy looking at the chemistry and geochemistry of the lower and upper Florida aquifers, and 2 reports pertaining to the Florida aquifer system in the Lower Kissimmee Basin planning area are listed at the top in bold font here. These are also available online. All right. Additionally, the Water Supply Bureau is constantly actively monitoring groundwater conditions using a cooperative monitoring network with the USGS and publishes a weekly conditions report highlighting changing water levels in relation to rainfall and surface water level conditions. So what you're looking at here is a map of USGS and district monitor wells that we track on a weekly basis to understand how the system's working, identify areas that may be under stress, and to help determine if water shortage conditions are anticipated. Monitoring also enables us to keep an eye on long-term trends and identify any developing problem areas that may need additional water resource protection measures. All right, one last thing here. The district continues to partner with local governments and other entities to implement water conservation projects and to develop alternative water supplies. Conservation and alternative water supply projects are important demand management tools for water supply planning by reducing the use of and increasing the sustainability of traditional sources. From 2019 through the 2022 base year, the district funded over 25 million worth of conservation and alternative water supply projects district-wide, creating 42.5 million gallons a day of alternative water supply capacity and conserving over 3 million gallons a day through conservation project funding. Since agriculture accounts for over 95% of the projected 2045 demands in the Kissimmee Basin planning area, and since this area contains a large amount of crop acreage irrigated using flood seepage, as well as some nursery acreage using methods other than low volume systems, this region has a large potential to benefit from agricultural conservation and alternative water supply projects. All right. So that's all I had for this section on the progress since the 2019 plan update and the objectives of the 2024 plan update. The next agenda item is an update on the comprehensive Everglades restoration projects. So we can take any questions on this section at this time.
Thanks, Chad. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand.
No hands raised.
No hands raised. Okay. Then we can move on. Next on the agenda, we will have Leslie Waugh, give an overview of SERP project. Leslie, go ahead if you're ready.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Leslie Wall, and I'm a section administrator here at the South Florida Water Management District, and I manage our ecosystem restoration planning and project management section. And we are responsible for implementing our SERP program, or our Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan projects. So next slide, please. So today I want to give an update on some of our SERP projects. So this slide is just an overview of the South Florida Ecosystem Restoration Program. So these projects are where the South Florida Water Management District are partners with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and SERP projects are just a portion of the projects in the SFER program. And my presentation today will focus on those SERP projects, mostly within the north of the lake and the lower Kissimmee region, and then adjacent regions around Lake Okeechobee. But I do want to start, next slide, please, with the Kissimmee River Restoration Project. As it was mentioned before, this is very large restoration project. It is under the umbrella of the South Florida Ecosystem Restoration. It's a foundation project. It started back in 1999, and it restores more than 40 square miles of the river floodplain and 44 miles of the historic river channel. So the majority of the restoration efforts were completed. We had a ribbon cutting in 2021, and that was the major construction projects that like Lawrence Glenn likes to say, puts the wiggle back in the river. So we backfilled some of the canal portions that were dug, were dug through the river floodplain, and restored those areas and rehydrated the floodplain, which can reach up to 3 miles wide in some areas. And although, the major construction projects are complete for the river restoration, there are still a few activities being conducted. The Corps is currently repairing the S69 weir that had some damages to it that occurred after Hurricane Ian. And the Corps also awarded a contract to install some navigational signs along the river. So this map here indicates where some of that signage will be installed. So if you see some work out there occurring, there's just some additional activities that needed to be conducted. So next slide, please. So now that the river restoration is complete, the headwaters revitalization schedule is the last piece of the Kissimmee River Restoration Project. And the headwaters revitalization schedule will be implemented in phases. And the purpose of that is to hold more water in Lakes Kissimmee, Cypress, and Hatchinahaw. And the new regulation schedule will support flood control, water supply, the health of the lakes, and provide those restoration flows to the Kissimmee River. So increment 1 of the headwaters schedule is anticipated to be approved soon. That's been in the works with the Army Corps the last year or so. And we expect it to be implemented starting this wet season. And the purpose of doing this first increment is to implement the new operational plan that incorporates that additional storage capacity in Lakes Kissimmee, Cypress, and Hatchinahaw that we achieved through real estate acquisition. And if you look at the schedule that's on the slide, the current schedule is the blue line, the lower blue line. And then increment 1 will be the red line. So it's following the anticipated full headwater schedule, the seasonality, but it's not going to the full elevations yet. So it's just an increment of that full headwater schedule. And then the full headwater schedule, which is the green line, that will be evaluated in a planning process that is upcoming between the Corps and the district, and that will be a public process. And we expect the implementation of the full schedule to be in the 2027 timeframe. Okay, next slide. So for our CERT projects, there are a number of CERT projects that are in the design and construction phase. And we've been fortunate the last few years to have record funding on the state and the federal side of CERT. So we really are in the height of implementation. And I'll just touch on a few of the many projects that we have. But if you have questions about any of the other projects, always feel free to reach out to me. My contact information will be at the end of the presentation. But I will touch on the projects that are in bold on this list. So next slide. So first we have the Indian River Lagoon South project. This project is in design and construction. It includes 5 reservoirs, 3 stormwater treatment areas, and restoration of natural areas that will reduce freshwater inflows and generate habitat and water quality improvements in the St. Lucie estuary and the Indian River Lagoon. So the C44 reservoir in STA is complete and in the operational testing and monitoring phase. And then by the end of this year, all features within the phase 1 will either be complete or under construction. So there's going to be a lot of work going on for the Indian River Lagoon South starting this year. And then the next project is the C43 reservoir. So the purpose of this reservoir is to capture and store basin runoff and regulatory releases from Lake Okeechobee. And that helps reduce those damaging discharges to the estuary, and then also helps improve the salinity balance. So we'll capture those peak flows during the wet season, and then you can, release those flows at the appropriate time to help the salinity balance in the estuary. And the district is, this is currently under construction. We are continuing construction of that project, but we do expect the reservoir to be ready for the wet season next year. Next slide. So the Central Everglades Planning Project, this project spans from Lake Okeechobee all the way south to Florida Bay. The purpose of this project is to divert flows from the northern estuaries and provide restoration flows to the Central Everglades National Park and all the way down to Florida Bay. And this project, since it is so large, it is broken down into 4 phases. So there's the Everglades agricultural area, SEP North. So the Everglades agricultural area, which is, to store and treat water. And then SEP North are those conveyance features along the northern part of the Water Conservation Area 3A that will help convey those treated flows into the water conservation areas. Down south to the SEP South phase of the project, which is down around Tamiami Trail. And those features will help decompartmentalize and open up the south end of the system to help those flows go into Shark River Slough, into Everglades National Park, and down to Florida Bay. And then we also have the new water phase, which is the seepage management wall. That actually we just had the ribbon cutting last week for, and that project is complete and was completed ahead of schedule. So all the phases for SEP are currently either in design or in construction. And if you would like more detailed information on SEP, we do have a public meeting, a public informational meeting scheduled for tomorrow from 3 to 4:30. If you want details on that meeting, to attend that meeting, you can find that information on the Corps website, or you can reach out to me if you want those details. Okay, so now we'll go into some of our planning projects that we have currently ongoing. Again, a number of planning projects, but I'm just going to touch on 2 of them today that are in the lower Kissimmee Basin. Next slide, please. So for the Lake Okeechobee Watershed Restoration Project, the project consists of 2 components. So we have the aquifer storage and recovery wells, or ASR wells, and then we also have the wetland restoration sites. So the Corps and the district are currently, this project has been in planning for a while. The Corps and the district are currently preparing a final project implementation report and an environmental impact statement that will be released soon, probably, and within the next 2 months for review. We are targeting authorization of the wetland restoration component for this year's Water Resources Development Act for 2024. And then the ASR well component is still part of the recommended plan, but it is pending additional science, and that additional science is being conducted by the Corps' Engineering Research and Development Center, or ERDIC. And we recently went into a contract with ERDIC to complete that science. And once that science is done, it will help inform the implementation of ASR wells, and then we'll continue with the process to implement ASR once that additional science is done. Next slide. But as ERDIC is doing their research, the district is also continuing to develop the design and implementation of ASR technology. And we are doing that through a phased science-based approach. And that is detailed in the ASR well science plan that was developed by the district and the Corps. And that science plan reflects the latest science and information on the use of ASR wells and Everglades restoration projects. If you would like more information on the science plan, we do update it periodically. And the newest research and information is reviewed and presented to an ASR science plan peer review panel. And that is a public meeting. And the next workshop is tentatively scheduled for mid-July. So if you'd like to participate in that meeting, we will be sending out notifications prior to that. Next slide. So also north of the lake in the Lower Kissimmee Basin area is the Lake Okeechobee Component A Reservoir, or LOCAR. So the district prepared a feasibility study under the Section 203 of WRDA, which is a mechanism that allows the non-federal sponsor to complete a feasibility study. But we also worked with the Army Corps to prepare an environmental impact statement as well on that to evaluate that component, which is component A of SERP. And that proposes a 200,000 acre-foot above ground reservoir. And this project is meant to capture water during the wet times and release it better during the dry times. And that provides benefit to Lake Okeechobee and the northern estuaries. So that feasibility study was completed and is currently under review by the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works in their office. And we are targeting a WRDA 24 authorization for this project as well. And then my last slide, I always like to finish with the IDS, the Integrated Delivery Schedule. So this is our roadmap for restoration project implementation. And if you want to know how we or when we plan to plan, design, or construct a project, this is a great reference. We also update the schedule annually. The Corps and the Water Management District do, and we will be starting that process this summer. So this is also additional opportunities for public engagement during that process. So same thing, be on the lookout for meeting notifications from the Corps in the coming months to update this schedule. But you know, this is a great resource if you have any questions on projects and looking for when we plan to design, construct, or operate features. And that can be found at the link on the website or on the slide. So that's my last slide. And if anybody has any questions, let me know. And we also have Liz Kaneha. She's one of our project managers. She's also on the line, and she's the project manager for the Lake Okeechobee Watershed Project and LOCAR. So if you have any questions about those two, she can help me address those.
Great, thank you, Leslie. Does anyone have any questions for Leslie or Liz about any of the SERP projects? Gary, I hope that answered your question. If you had more detailed thoughts or questions about that, let us know.
Mentioning Gary, he has his hand raised.
Well, yes, and I think it did in general, and I'm assuming based on the presentation by Leslie that you know, I know there's a strong environmental component to SERP and the Lake Okeechobee watershed projects and LOCAR, but I'm assuming and I did see smatterings in that presentation concerning water supply. So I'm assuming each one of them will also have a water supply component for Lake Okeechobee and the lower Kissimmee.
Yes, so they both the projects, especially with the ASR and the LOCAR, do provide benefits for water supply. And Liz, I don't know if you want to add
Yeah,
any specifics.
I was just going to add the way that we look at water supply availability is we look at the number of water supply cutbacks. So you'll see in the reports prepared, the PIR and also the feasibility study for the LOCAR project, but it would be the PIR EIS for LORP. You'll see graphics in there that show reductions in these water supply cutbacks with the implementation of these projects. And that's found in Annex B of both of the PIR and also the feasibility study.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Leslie or Liz? Please raise your hand. No hands? Okay, then we can move on to the next presentation in the agenda, and Rebecca will tell us about our draft demand estimates and projections.
Sorry about that.
We're okay, everyone. Thanks, Tom. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Rebecca May, and I'm a senior scientist with the Water Supply Bureau at the district. Today, I'll be discussing the demand estimates and projections for the 2024 Lower Kissimmee Basin Water Supply Plan update. I first wanted to begin with outlining some observations since the 2019 plan. First, irrigated agricultural acreage is projected to decrease slightly through the end of the planning horizon. Irrigated pasture, also referred to as hay in this presentation, and citrus are still the top two crops grown in this area. There have been very slight changes to utility service area boundaries, and population projections have been updated using the latest census and Bieber data. Again, Tom defined Bieber earlier in this presentation, but a refresher, it's the University of Florida's Bureau of Economic and Business Research. This slide illustrates land use changes over time in the city of Okeechobee. The aerial image on the left represents a snapshot from 1970, and the image on the right represents the same area in 2023. The main noticeable change here is the appearance of the L63 canal on the right-hand side of, mainly the 2023 image. You can see they were beginning to construct the canal in 1970. Now we're going to start discussing the draft demands for each of the 6 water use categories, beginning with public supply and domestic self-supply. But before we can talk about demand, we need to derive population, since that is one of the main driving factors of water usage trends, particularly in the public supply and domestic self-supply categories. The district is required by statute to consider Bieber medium projections. Our methodology maintains Bieber County level totals. The objectives are to accurately describe the population changes in the lower Kissimmee Basin planning area using the best available data, and to have a simple, reproducible, and transparent methodology that is consistent with local governments and other district water supply planning efforts. Next slide. This graphic shows the workflow for developing the population projections. We first start off with census data and distribute that to utility service area boundaries. The county level growth projected by the Bieber report is applied to each utility to develop the future predictions of growth. There are 6 utilities in the lower Kissimmee Basin planning area. Starting in the northwest corner and rotating clockwise, we have the Sebring Airport, Spring Lake Improvement District, then the Okeechobee Correctional Institute, Okeechobee Utility Authority, which is the largest utility in this planning area, the Seminole Tribe of Florida Brighton Reservation, and finally, Lakeport Water Association. These service areas are predicted to see minimal change through 2045. Overall, Bieber projects the total permanent resident population to grow approximately 9% from just over 52,400 in the base year of 2022 to just over 57,200 in 2045, which is the end of the planning horizon. This slide divides the total population by county and category. The public supply category includes water withdrawn, treated, and delivered to service areas by privately and publicly owned water supply utilities. And domestic self-supply includes individual residences in rural areas without access to a public system. You'll notice that most of these county and category combinations are seeing less than 10% growth. However, the public supply category in Glades County, which is the top row, is seeing a larger increase through 2045. And this is largely due to new developments that are planned in the area. But again, overall growth currently projected for this planning area is about 9%. This graph illustrates a comparison of total permanent resident population projections from the last 3 lower Kissimmee Basin Plan updates and the current 2024 draft, which is illustrated by the orange line. The y-axis of this graph represents population and the x-axis represents the year or over time. Projections showed greater growth before the 2008 economic downturn, while more recent reports suggest more modest trends. The blue line represents data from the 2005-2006 plan, which shows the steepest curve. Each subsequent line has been flattening out. An important application of these population estimates and projections is that they are used to develop water demands. These are calculated using a per capita use rate from a recent 5-year average population and water use. Then the projected populations are multiplied by the per capita use rate to derive demands in 5-year increments. The previous slides have dealt with population numbers, but now we will be transitioning into discussion of water demands. This bar graph represents public supply and domestic self-supply water use for the base year of 2022 and 2045 for the current plan update. On the right, for comparison, is a bar showing the 2040 demands from the previous 2019 plan. The green bar segments represent public supply demand, and the blue segments represent domestic self-supply portions. Overall, these demands are projected to increase about 10% through the end of the planning horizon. The next category we will talk about is agriculture, which is the largest water use category in this planning area. It includes water used for commercial crop irrigation, nurseries, livestock watering, pasture, and aquaculture. There are 9 standard crop categories that we analyze in water supply planning. A few notable crops to mention in this region are hay, which again has also been referred to as irrigated pasture in this presentation, citrus, and sugarcane. These are the main sources of data that are used to develop demands during plan updates. We will be discussing a few of these in more detail in the coming slides. FDACS is the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. Every year, they publish the Florida Statewide Agricultural Irrigation Demand Report. This report contains historical and projected acreage and demands. They factor in metered data from each water management district, and they consult with stakeholders during the annual update process. Similar to how the district is required by statute to consider Bieber projections of population, we're also required by statute to consider FDAC's agricultural projections in our regional water supply plans. Any deviation in methodology must be described. So data from the FSET are presented in this presentation along with any adjusted data. The image on the right of this slide is a screenshot from the interactive online dashboard created by FDAX, which shows crop and acreage demands by water management district and also planning area. The main components of the agricultural category are irrigated acreages for which FSET acreages were used and water demands. This is where the district's methodology differs from FDAX. So rather than using demands from the FSET product, the district uses demand from the Agricultural Field Scale Irrigation Requirements Simulation, also referred to as AFSIRS model. AFSIRS uses location-specific environmental variables and does not factor in crop profitability, while the FSET has a more limited set of environmental variables and irrigation intensities vary in response to crop profitability. After comparing these two methods, the district has decided that the AFSIRS model is more consistent with regional modeling efforts and approximates water use permit applications or allocations rather. This map shows the current irrigated and agricultural lands from the FSET 10 product. You'll notice that the vast majority of land is classified under non-irrigated agricultural land, which are the kind of pale beige colored polygons. Again, the largest two irrigated croplands are hay, which is presented as that sort of bluish purple color, and citrus, which is the bright orange color polygon. These bar graphs represent acreages by crop, irrigated acreages by crop, from the FSET 10 report. The graph on the left represents the base year of 2021, and the one on the right represents the projected 2045 values. The table at the bottom of the slide shows a comparison of total crop acreages between the current FSET 10, which is the top row, and the FSET 5, which was presented in the 2019 Lower Kissimmee Basin Plan, which is the bottom row of the table. The previous plan projected minimal growth in irrigated acreages, and the current projections show about a 4% decline. Base year estimates are lower than the previous plan, mainly due to FDAX and Balmoral field observations of reductions in existing pasture and citrus. In terms of demands, this slide illustrates the differences between the FSET and AFSIRS methodologies. Again, the district uses AFSIRS for agricultural demands due to approximations of permitting allocations and consistency with regional modeling efforts. To compare the draft 2024 plan demands to the previous 2019 plan, the previous plan showed a 3% increase in demands, and we're currently showing about a 4% decrease. The bar graphs show the total demands by crop. The table at the bottom again shows the planning area totals. The top row represents the current draft numbers, and the bottom row presents the numbers from the previous plan again. The agricultural category can be further subdivided into crop, livestock, and aquaculture demands. This table has the breakdown of demand for each of these components. Livestock and aquaculture demands are taken directly from the FSET product and are projected to remain stable throughout the planning horizon. Overall, again, even with all three components combined, the agriculture demand is projected to see a slight decrease of about 4%. The next demand category is commercial, industrial, institutional, also referred to as CII. This consists of self-supplied water consumed by business operations, a few examples being hotels, schools, hospitals, and mining operations are also included in this category. Base year estimates were based on either reported pumpage or permitted allocations, which are summarized in the district's annual estimated water use report. Water returned directly to the source are not factored into the demands. Mining and commercial operations are projected to increase with the same growth as the population. And although in this table it appears that Okeechobee County is not seeing any growth in commercial, industrial, institutional, it is very minimal. and so it's not apparent in this table due to rounding. The landscape recreational category includes water used for irrigation of golf courses, parks, cemeteries, large common areas such as homeowners associations, to name a few examples. Base year estimates for acreage and water demand are based on permitted data. Landscape comprised approximately 610 acres, and golf courses comprised approximately 221 acres in 2022. The distinction is made between these two land uses because they're predicted to grow at different rates. The landscape use is predicted to grow along with the population. Golf course is predicted to remain stable throughout the planning horizon, as it is based on approved projects. The final water use category is power generation. This includes water consumed by power plants for use in the production of electricity. There are no power plants in the Lower Kissimmee Basin planning area. The power needs are currently being met by facilities located outside of the planning area, and there are no new facilities planned. So finally, here is a table containing base year and projected water demand data for each of the 6 water use categories within the Lower Kissimmee Basin planning area. For comparison purposes, the projected demands from the 2019 plan are also presented on the right-hand side of the table. Overall, the demand is projected to decrease by about 3%. And since the projected demands are less than the previous 2 plans, modeling updates have been deemed not necessary at this time. And that concludes my presentation. At this time, we'll take any questions or comments.
Anyone has any questions for Rebecca, please raise your hand. That was a lot of information, so we'll give a minute.
Gary has his hand raised.
Yeah, I don't have a question. Rebecca, that was a very good presentation. Just a comment of a historical perspective on your first slide. So in 1970, when the L63 canal was being constructed, that diverted flows from Taylor Creek. Taylor Creek runs through the city of Okeechobee, but the L63 canal does not, just as a matter of reference.
Okay, thank you.
Rich Reed has his hand up.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I was wondering, with regards to the planning and understanding new development, how are you engaging with counties and cities with regards to plans over the next 20 years outside of what Beaver is projecting?
We meet with utilities and send them draft utility profiles, we call them, and that contains the information that we use in the plan regarding existing population, historic per capita use rate, and population projections and demand projections. And they're asked to review that information and provide feedback on it. So we coordinate with the utilities in that way. If they want to have individual meetings with us, we will do that. But we typically send it to them in advance and let them review it and comment.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, we also look at comprehensive plan information. Those are typically, a 10-year horizon, but we utilize that information as well.
Okay, and were you also reaching out to the local governments on maybe the planning department side as well? Or is it just through the utilities and the comp planning?
Primarily through the utilities. We can reach out to the local governments. Sometimes we do and we don't hear back, but we do reach out, yes.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure. Any other thoughts or questions for Rebecca on her presentation?
I'm not seeing any additional hand raised.
Okay. Thank you, Rebecca. We'll move on now. Next on the agenda, Chad will tell us about our next steps in the planning process.
Okay, I'm going to close things out here by going over how we are going to move forward with completing the plan update. This is a listing of the chapters and appendices we're currently working on drafting. We just heard Rebecca give an excellent presentation on the demands, which are the heart of the plan. Looking out to 2045, what will be the water needs for all the use types? The demand projections are described and listed in Chapter 2 in Appendix A. And both of those are currently drafted and soon to be posted for public review and comment, along with the water conservation information in Chapter 3 and the introductory chapter. Chapter 4 deals with the water protection measures we have in place, those MFLs, restricted allocation areas, and reservations. Chapter 5 will go through a palette of water source options in the planning region. And Chapter 6 will describe the current state of the water resources in the region, the groundwater levels of the superficial and Florida aquifer systems, the salinity of the upper Florida aquifer, and noting any trends in how we expect the demands projected through 2045 to affect those water resources. Chapter 7 is being updated with the help of Leslie Waugh and Liz Kenyeha. Chapter 7 describes the water resource development projects discussed previously that will create new water supplies in the planning region while also protecting and enhancing natural systems. The document will conclude with Chapter 8 and a discussion of the future direction. We also have Appendix B drafted. That includes the public supply utility profiles that Matt Staley has been working with the utilities in the region on developing. And he's already sent those out to the respective utilities for their review and comment. Again, noting the importance of developing the plan with participation and input from the stakeholders. Over the next several months, we're going to be continuing to coordinate with the utilities, agriculture, and other stakeholders. As we continue to develop the chapters and appendices, we'll send them out for public review and comment. Of course, we're always staying up to date with the progress of local development and regional projects. And we would greatly appreciate your sharing of any information you think might be relevant to the plan. Anything such as plan developments, golf courses, any projects that might affect demands in the area, including water supply projects. Our next stakeholder meeting coming up in a couple months will provide a very detailed description of the water resource protection measures that we already have in place. And that information will be presented along with an overview of the complete draft of the Kissimmee Basin Plan update. So some dates here. Today, of course, is the first stakeholder meeting, and the next one will be in August, when we'll also post the actual draft of the plan in totality. The public comment period closes in September after we present the draft plan to the governing board. And then we're looking to have the final plan document approved at the governing board meeting in November. And here's the contact information for those looking to communicate by email. All of the plan information can be found on the district's website, the address listed here, along with a recording of today's presentation that'll be posted later. We'll be sending out future meeting announcements via email to all the stakeholder contacts we have on file. Feel free to send any of us listed above any questions or information that you I think might be relevant to the plan. I'd like to thank our other presenters. Everything was very informative, and of course, thank you to everybody who participated today. We look forward to your continued participation and input to make sure we're addressing your concerns.
All right, thanks, Chad. I also want to thank everyone who attended the meeting today. Feel free to reach out with us with any questions. We have posted the agenda and the presentations you've seen here today on our webpage. So if you want to go back and look at slides, you can certainly do that. And in a few days, we'll have the recording made available as well. So if there's any closing thoughts or comments or questions right now, we'll take those. Okay, no hands raised. Again, thank you, everyone, and we appreciate your participation. Have a good day.